Hello, my name is Greg Jobs, and today we're introducing the most amazing, remarkable, magnificent update to macOS ever. For those of you who think we just took the design of the iPad and copied it over to the Mac, we've gone far beyond the surface. No longer is Mac called version 10.x. From now on, macOS will be called 11.0 or above. So you'll no longer have to be confused as to whether to call it macOS 10 or macOS X. Now you only have to wonder whether it's Big Sur or bigsur. Seriously though, I've been a Mac user on and off for the past 15 years and consistently for the past 5, and I consider myself a power user, whether it's for video editing or running a business, doing product management or coding. I tend to push my Mac to the max. And I've learned quite a bit about how to go beyond the surface and really maximize the experience of using a Mac. You see, I think Macs are pretty easy to use out of the box, but for people coming from Windows, sometimes they get a little tripped up by some of the way things work on Mac. And also, there's a lot of functionality on the Mac that's not necessarily obvious. And once you learn about this functionality, it really makes using the Mac a breeze because the workflow is so great on a Mac once you know how to navigate it using not only the mouse, but the keyboard. So today, I want to dive into a few of the things that I have learned over the years about how to use a Mac more effectively. I'm not going to show you my entire setup, just the things that I think are really important for improving productivity on a Mac. So let's dive right into it. When upgrading your Mac, whether you're coming from an old Mac to a new one, or whether you're upgrading your old Mac to a new version of the operating system, there's always the discussion of whether you should just upgrade or whether you should do a clean install of the new operating system. And in my opinion, you should always do a clean install. Yes, it involves transferring over some of your old files, but we'll get into that. And it also involves setting some new settings. But in my opinion, this is like getting a whole new computer, and it's a fresh start to really question all the things that you had on your old computer, because I always find that there are certain things that I did install that I stopped using at some point. And it's a good way to get rid of all that old crud just by never installing it again. For your files, I recommend putting them on an external drive or using something like Dropbox or Google Drive to back up the files. If you're a power user, you can put them in a separate partition, but in case something goes wrong, you may want to have a backup somewhere. Now, regarding your applications, I find that the easiest thing to do is on your old computer, take a screenshot of all the apps that are in the applications folder, and then you can save them to something like Apple Notes or just send yourself an email. And then on the new computer, then you can just open that list and see which apps you still use and manually download each one of them. Overall, I think that that gives you a much fresher, cleaner experience as opposed to just upgrading it and ending up with all these random settings and old programs that you're not using anymore. Now it's time to get into the really fun stuff. As you can see on my Mac, I've already installed Big Sur and even made some changes like changing the desktop background and installing the apps that I like to use. But I want to show you some of the changes that I like to make, and we're going to start with the dock and the menu bar. One of the most annoying things about the Mac to me is that the dock and menu bar take up a lot of vertical space when you add them all together. And I see a lot of people using Macs that have the menu bar up all the time, and it's just taking up so much space that they could be using to look at web pages or work on a video project. So one thing you could easily do is make the dock smaller, and I like to do this even though I actually hide it, because then the distance that my mouse has to travel to click on things is a little bit less. But I like to make it so a slightly smaller size, but I still like to be able to see it. Then I click this box here, automatically hide and show the dock. So then what happens is the dock is not usually showing, but you can just move your mouse to the bottom of the screen and it will show up. So I find that this is easy enough, and look how much extra screen real estate you have versus having that huge default dock. There is also an option to automatically hide and show the menu bar, and it would be the same thing where you would move the mouse to the top of the screen. This might be great for more intensive work. Personally, I don't like to do this though, because on Mac, it tells you the name of the application that you're in right now on the left side, and I also just like having the time at a glance. So I personally hide the dock, but I leave the menu bar showing. Another thing that people don't seem to know how to do by default is to customize the dock so that the apps that they want on the dock are showing. And it's surprising because there are a bunch of apps that probably people don't use that we could easily get rid of. So what I like to do is go into the dock and remove any of these apps that I'm not using. So for example, I personally don't use the Launchpad. So I can click on this, so hold down Control and then click on it. And then I can click remove from dock and it will disappear. So you would do that for any of the apps that you don't find that you use. So for example, for me, that's Mail, Options, remove from dock. Maps, Options, remove from dock. Now these aren't deleted from your computer, they're still accessible, and you can actually just access them by searching for them. They're just not going to be in your dock. So I only put like the apps that I use all the time there, and then everything else I search for it. Now if an app is open, which you would be able to tell with this little dot below the app's icon, instead of showing remove from dock, it will actually have the option keep from dock, and you'll be able to check or uncheck it. So this app is open, but I don't want it in the dock, so I'm going to uncheck that. And now there are apps that I do want to keep in the dock. So this middle section here will actually dynamically change based on the most recent apps that I've used. But for example, I'd like to keep Spotify in the dock, so I'm going to Control click on that and then click keep in dock. And then you see it moves over to this left side here, and then I can drag it to position it exactly where I want it to be. So that's my much more pared down dock, and as you can see, it's a lot more organized for my own taste. And of course, if there's an app that I would use sometimes, like for example, podcasts, I can just search for that in Spotlight by holding down Command and hitting the spacebar, then searching for it and pressing Enter. So that's a more productive way to navigate around the Mac. Now by default, in the bottom right of the dock, the Mac includes the Downloads folder and the Trash Can. And I actually like to add 2 more folders to this for maximum productivity. And the first one is the Applications folder. So instead of using Mission Control, which is big, and it looks like it's more optimized for a tablet, the Applications folder is very compact and it's easy to access all of the applications. So the way you do that is you click the Finder, and then over here on the left side you have the Applications folder, and you're going to just drag that down to the bottom here, like that. By default, it'll have this grid view, which I think is fine, but personally, I actually like a different view. So I'm gonna right-click that folder, which would be Control-click on your laptop, and I will change that to a list view. And now you can see instead of that grid, it actually just shows a very nice compact alphabetical list here. So I think that that is a more efficient way to navigate the Applications folder in specific. The other thing I like to do is create a screenshots folder. Now by default, when you create screenshots on the Mac, they all save to the desktop. And this tends to get quite messy. And if you have a lot of screenshots, it can actually be hard to find the screenshot that you're looking for. So I actually like to do something different, which is to create a screenshots folder that shows up down in the dock that I can instantly find all the screenshots that I've taken more recently. So the first thing we'll want to do is create a screenshots folder, and one place you might want to do it is in your Documents folder. So you go to Finder and then go to the Documents section, and then we'll create a new folder from here. So we will go right click and then New Folder, Screenshots, and we probably want to use the columns view here. And then the screenshots folder will do there. I actually put mine in Google Drive, but it doesn't really matter where you save yours. Then what you'll do is you take your screenshots folder and you will drag it down to the dock here. And then you have to set the location of the screenshots folder to save in that folder. So to do that, we'll access the screenshot workflow at Command-Shift-5, and then we'll click Options, Other Location, and we'll drag our screenshots workflow folder into here and click choose. And then now any screenshot will save into the folder that we selected instead of to the desktop. So now when you go to create a screenshot, so I'm going to do the Command-Shift-4 screenshot option, spacebar, return, it will show the screenshot in an editable workflow here. And then once that disappears, it will automatically appear down in the folder that we just created. So I find that this is a much more useful way to save your screenshots. Okay, let's talk about customizing the menu bar a bit more. So in the top right of the menu bar, Big Sur has this new feature, which is the notification center, which can have your control over Wi-Fi, sound, Bluetooth, display, and other features. And I think that's great. It's nice to see it all in one place. However, I like to have a few things out on the menu bar, and I like to remove a few things from the menu bar. So for one, I don't use the Safari search from the menu bar, because you can just access it by holding down Command and then clicking the space bar and searching for an app like Safari, and it will show right up. So we can actually remove the spotlight icon, and all we have to do is hold down Command and then drag it out of the menu bar until the X shows up, and then it will disappear. Likewise, I actually like adding things to the menu bar. For example, I like having the sound icon in the menu bar because at a glance, I can see what the volume level roughly is. So I can know whether it's going to be really loud just by looking at it instead of having to click on the sound level. So you can see if I adjust the sound here, it's going to change in the menu bar as well. If you would like to show the volume in the menu bar, all you have to do is go into the control center and then you would just drag it out here like that. So that's really great. The only downside of Big Sur is now they introduced this new headphone icon whenever you have something plugged into it. So you don't have this visual indication anymore. Kind of annoying, but hey, it's a small price to pay for an overall great experience. Back in System Preferences in Dock and Menu Bar, I like to make one more change if you're using a Mac laptop, which is to show the battery percentage so you know exactly how much it's discharged. So you'll scroll down here on the left to Battery, and then you're going to click Show Percentage, and now it will show the percentage of the battery remaining next to the battery indicator. As you can see, there are some other menu bar items that are here, and these are from third-party apps, and unfortunately, I don't want to show all of them, but sometimes the third-party apps do not give you control over this. I wish Apple would give us more control of this in the future. Now let's talk about Finder, which is kind of like Windows Explorer, but for the Mac. And I actually like it quite a bit better as it has some better features. But there's some hidden functionality here, and there's some things you can do to make the user experience even better. So one of the first things I'll do is I'll customize what I can show here in the side. And you can actually drag different folders directly into the favorites section, but you can also go into the Finder preferences and add anything that's not showing here. So I like to show my home folder, for example. These other ones I don't really think are relevant. I could hide the desktop folder, and I will keep the rest. Once we're in Finder Preferences, I like to go into Advanced and make a few additional changes. So one, show all file name extensions. If you don't have this checked, sometimes the Mac will hide the extension, so like the .mov or .jpeg of the file for whatever reason. Also in Advanced, at the bottom, there's this option to select what you're searching when you're searching. Well, by default, it usually selects search this Mac, but I actually like to search the current folder instead. So when you're searching within the Finder, you can search for something like screenshots, and by default, it would show this Mac, and you can certainly change it to that, but here it's searching this folder first, which I think is more intuitive. Another thing I like to do is to change the view of the folder structure in Finder. So by default, it might show this view, which is icons. And I think that this is fine for pictures, but for other things like documents, it tends to not be super helpful if you have a good naming structure. So what I like to do is actually use the columns view. And what's really cool about this is you can use the keyboard to really efficiently navigate through this. So for example, I can use the down button on my keyboard to go to the downloads folder, and then I can use the right arrow to get to the next level. And then if I want to go into this folder down here, I just use the down button and then here. Now to actually open a file on the Mac, instead of hitting return or enter, which will rename the file on Mac, you would hit Command O to open the file up. That's one thing that really trips people up, the Command O, instead of clicking return to open a file, but once you know it, it's super powerful. One of the most used features for me on the Mac that very few people seem to know about is the ability to drag folders. So for example, I've opened Gmail over here and I've opened up the new attachments window, and it pops up with this box to attach something. Now most people think you have to go through this box and re-navigate it, but what if you already have the folder you want to use up on your computer? Well, here's something that most people don't know about. I can actually drag a file into this dialog. And instead of moving the file that you just dragged into the folder that was showing, it will actually open that other folder up on your screen. And there's another thing you can do as well. So instead of dragging an individual file over, you can actually drag the other folder over if you don't know exactly. So what you do is you go over to Finder and you hover your mouse over the name, and this little folder icon pops up here, and then you drag that folder over to the new window, and you can see now I can select the right file that I want to attach. This is also useful if you want to quickly move a file to another folder. So you could drag it from here, but you could also go to the top and you could hover over and drag it, and it would move to the new folder. The next tool I want to talk about is Alfred, and I want to forewarn you that this is not exactly free software, but for what I do use it for, it saves me a ton of time, so I think it's worth it. Now, I use Alfred for two things. The one is text expansion and the other is clipboard history. So let me break that down. The first would be the text snippets. And these are short little bits of text that you can type out that will expand into longer text. So for example, it's kind of annoying for me to type out my bedtime bulb website all the time to do https://bedtimebulb.com, right? Well, I have a text expansion in Alfred that allows me to just say BBURL, and it will automatically expand into the text that I want. Another thing you could use this for is easily displaying a legal disclaimer. So I just saved this one, BBDISC, and then instantly it expands to a new disclaimer. The other thing you might use it for is an email signature, so you could easily insert all of your phone number, your website address, whatever you want to put in your email signature. And the final thing that you could do is insert information that you find hard to remember. So for example, these are the Amazon codes for my product, and I don't really remember them because they're just a bunch of random numbers and letters. So I can just do BB02ASIN, and that will instantly fill out the product number for my product on Amazon. So you can see that there's many examples that text expansion can do. Now, setting this up isn't too difficult. Basically, you have to download Alfred, get the Power Pack installed so that they know you've paid for it, and then the place for snippets will be under Features, Snippets. And what you do is you click the plus button down at the bottom right, and then you can add new text. So for example, let's create a link to YouTube right now. So I'm gonna just say YouTube link is the name. So then we create the keyword. So this is what we type to bring up the new text. And the thing is here, you have to be a little bit creative with how you do this because you don't wanna put a normal word that you would normally type because otherwise it will fill that. So we need to do something like YU2. That's unique. We would probably never type that outside of this text expansion. And then we have to type what we actually want to fill. So here it would be https://youtube.com/ and that would expand to YouTube. So then we would save that. And then if we go into our text editor, but it could be any software, it could be like a website browser, it could be a message or an email that you're sending to somebody, it's anywhere. Then I can just say YU2 and it will instantly expand to youtube.com. So this tool is super powerful. The other really powerful feature that I use Alfred for is clipboard history. So normally when you copy and paste something, you can only do one thing at a time. As soon as you copy something new, you can no longer paste the old thing back. Well, Alfred allows you to keep a clipboard history. So as an example, I want to copy a few things from this article that I see here. So maybe we'll copy the title. So I'll select it and then Command C. And then we'll talk about Pixelmator here. So Pixelmator, blah, 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 copy that line of text. And then we'll pick one more thing, Writing App Ulysses. So now if I want to go paste that information, in the past I would have only been able to paste Writing with Ulysses and the other information would have disappeared. So indeed, when you go to Command V to paste stuff, the first thing that shows up is Writing App Ulysses. But what Alfred does is you can access the other text. So if you're to hold down Option and hit the space bar, then type CL return, then you can see all of these other text snippets. So here's the Pixelmator Pro text. And then I can do it again. So Option, spacebar, CL, and then I can find the universal apps for Apple Silicon. So you see that there's a lot of power in being able to copy multiple things at a time and then paste multiple things at a time instead of moving back and forth between two windows and two different screens. So again, Alfred is a bit expensive and it's a little complicated, but I find that the workflow of being able to do these two things really makes the app worth it. And there's much more that you can do that I haven't even explored, so definitely give Alfred a look. The Mac is really well optimized no matter what input method you use, save for touchscreens. And even though the mouse and trackpad options work really well on Mac, I do want to introduce some keyboard shortcuts that I think will save you a ton of time. I'll save you the basics such as copying, pasting, and opening files, but I do want to show you some more advanced ones that a lot of Mac users don't even know about. The first thing I want to show you is pasting unformatted text. So a lot of times you will copy and paste text, and the pasted text will be like the wrong size for the email you're trying to write or something like that, and it's pretty annoying, right? Well, there's a way on Mac in most applications to paste it and remove all of the formatting. So as you can see here in the left window, I have some text that has color applied to it, it has bolding and size changes, and it has italics. So if I select that, Command A, copy it, Command C, and then if I go over to the other window, which is Command tilde, and then normally if I Command V, it would paste the exact same text. But instead of Command V, if I Shift Option Command V, it will paste without the formatting. So just to demonstrate that, now if I Command V, it's still going to paste the formatted text. But if I Shift Option Command V, it will paste the unformatted text. And the only reason why it's italicized here, unlike the other one, is because the last bit of this text was italicized, so it will adopt whatever the existing text. So think about how much easier writing an email would be if you use Shift Option Command V to paste things, because it's going to remove all of that formatting around the text. Two disclaimers on this: it doesn't work in every app, it works in most, but some apps get weird about it, like Excel. And the other thing is it will remove URLs and other linking, so you might not want to use it for those types of things, but for changing the format of text, it's really great. The next keyboard shortcut I want to talk about has to do with Spotlight. So Spotlight is a tool you can use to search your computer for anything, and you can bring up Spotlight most easily by holding down Command and clicking the spacebar. Now, I'm going to search for a file, and I know it has ARIA in the name. So great, and I see the file down here. So normally I would click the return button and then it would show up here, and I can click the return button one more time and it will open it in preview or whatever app is appropriate for it. But say instead of opening the file, I actually want to open the folder that contains the file. Well, if I do that same search and then I hold down the command button, then click return, well, it will open the folder that contains the file instead of the file itself. This is not the only place you can use Command to open folders. So remember those shortcuts we made in the dock earlier? Well, when you click those, they open up this fan view or they open up something like this. But say you actually want to open the Finder. Well, you could move your mouse up here, click Open in Finder, or you could just hold down Command and then click on that folder and it will open it. You can hold down Command and click on the screenshots folder and it will open it. So this is a lot more convenient. Next is for deleting. So to delete a file on the Mac, you can hold down Command and click the delete button, and then it will send the file to the trash. So I'm just going to send these files to the trash. Well, if you want to empty the trash, you can go down to the trash and you can control click on it to empty the trash, or you can just Shift Command delete. So to delete a file is Command delete, and Shift Command delete will empty the trash. So check this out. So trash is full right now, Shift Command delete, and then do you want to empty the trash, click return, and it's gone. If you use Spaces on your Mac, which is a desktop manager which will allow you to create multiple desktops. This is especially useful on laptops where if you have a bunch of windows open, things can get a little crazy. So I just went and created some spaces, and I can select the two spaces. Now there's actually a Spaces button on some of the Mac keyboards that you can easily call that up. But if you hold down Control and then click the up arrow key on your keyboard, that will instantly bring up Spaces. And if you hold down Control and click the left or right arrow, that will instantly allow you to switch between the two spaces. The final keyboard shortcut I want to give you has to do with adjusting the volume. And disclaimer, this only works on the non-touch bar Macs. So in the current lineup, this would be the MacBook Air and all of the desktops, but all of the MacBook Pros, to my knowledge, have touch bars at this point. So normally when you're adjusting volume on your Mac, I believe you have 16 steps of volume change. But sometimes when you're changing the volume, the lower step is too low and the higher step is too high, and you want something that's right in the middle of that. Well, Macs actually do have precise control over this, but it's not immediately obvious how you do it. And the way you do it on a standard Mac keyboard is you hold down Shift and then you hold down Option, and then you use the volume adjustment. Now, instead of 16 steps, you have, I believe, 64 steps, because each step will give you 4 levels of minute adjustment. So that's a really great way to precisely adjust the volume. If you have a touch bar Mac, this actually doesn't work, but you can slide your finger to make precise adjustments on the volume controls. Those are some of the tools and hidden features that I use on my Mac to help me maximize productivity, and I hope by watching this you get some ideas on how you can maximize your own Mac workflow. Do you have any other tips for maximizing productivity on the Mac? If so, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And with that said, I want to say thanks so much, and I hope you have a great day.